I'm Ashley Wilmot, 28 years old, and 3 weeks ago I drove home with vintage champagne in the backseat, thinking my parents were finally going to tell me they were proud of me. My mother handed me a manila envelope in front of 30 relatives and whispered, "Consider this our return on investment." The whole room watched as I read the lawsuit, claiming my business, the one I built from scratch, was actually their property. I could feel their judgment, their pity, the weight of 30 pairs of eyes watching me realize I'd been summoned home not for celebration, but for legal ambush. And then I smiled, because I knew something they didn't. 5 words later, my father's smug expression cracked. Before I continue, if you're connecting with this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if it genuinely resonates. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back 6 years to the day everything began. 6 years ago, I was 22, fresh out of college with a marketing degree and a dream bigger than my parents' expectations. I thought I had my whole life figured out. My family looked successful from the outside. Dad, Thomas Wilmot, had been a real estate broker for 25 years. Mom, Antonia, was a former beauty queen who treated our family's image like a full-time career. And then there was Derek, my younger brother. 19, charming, effortlessly popular. He'd just dropped out of his third college, but nobody talked about that. The pattern wasn't new. It had always been there, stitched into the fabric of our family like a toxic thread no one wanted to pull. When I launched my first marketing campaign, landing a major client that would eventually become the foundation of my business, my parents took me to Applebee's. Just the three of us. Mom said, "We're not really the celebrating type, Ashley." I didn't argue. I never did. 3 months later, Derek announced he was taking time to find himself with a backpacking trip through Europe. They threw him a going-away party. 40 people, catered food. Dad gave a speech about how proud he was of his son's adventurous spirit and courage to forge his own path. I stood in the corner, refilling ice buckets, wondering why my success was invisible, but Derek's unemployment was inspirational. "Derek's going through a rough patch," Mom explained when I asked about the difference. "He needs support. You've always been so independent, so capable." I told myself she was right. Derek was struggling. He needed more attention. I was the older sister, competent, reliable, self-sufficient. That was my role. I had no idea that in just a few weeks, my father would call me with a request that would change everything. A request that would turn me from the independent daughter into something else entirely. Something they would spend the next 6 years exploiting before trying to steal from me completely. The first warning sign came 2 weeks before that phone call. I was home for Sunday brunch when I overheard Mom and Dad in the study. They were discussing Derek's credit card debt. Not small debt, the kind with collection agencies and legal threats. "We can't let people know," Mom hissed. "What would the neighbors think? What would the club think?" I thought about my own student loans, the ones I'd been paying off for 2 years with no help, no sympathy, working 60-hour weeks while living in a studio apartment with a broken heater. No one had ever worried about what people thought of that. I didn't say anything. I never did. Swallow it down, Ashley. Keep the peace. That Thursday evening, my phone rang at 9 p.m. Dad's number. His voice had that practiced casualness that always preceded a favor. "Ashley, honey, I need to run something by you. Just between us." My father was a man who never asked for help. In my entire life, I'd never heard him sound like this. Almost humble. Strategically vulnerable. "Dad, what's going on?" A long pause. Then, "Derek's gotten himself into some financial trouble. Nothing he can't recover from, but he needs a bridge. Just temporary." My father, The man who lectured me about fiscal responsibility every time I mentioned wanting to travel, the man who refused to co-sign my first business loan because you need to prove you can make it on your own, he was calling his too independent daughter in the evening, asking for money for the son who'd never been required to prove anything. How much does he need? Not much, maybe $15,000 to start. But Ashley, his voice dropped, your mother can't know the full extent of this. She's already stressed, and Derek needs to focus on getting back on his feet, not dealing with her disappointment. Even then, even in crisis, I was the one they could burden without consequence, the one whose feelings didn't require management, the one who was strong enough to handle being used. What he said next would reshape our relationship forever, though I didn't know yet that temporary help would become permanent ATM, or that every dollar I gave them would later be weaponized against me. The champagne bottle rolled slightly with each turn, catching the afternoon light through my rear window. Moet and Chandon, 2015. I'd been saving it for something special. Today felt special enough. 3 hours is a long time to build hope, long enough to convince yourself that maybe, finally, your parents see you, really see you. Not as the emergency contact they call at midnight when Derek's in trouble, not as the silent ATM dispensing cash with a smile, but as their daughter, the one who made something of herself. I thought about the text from Mom that morning. We have wonderful news. The whole family will be there. Come home, sweetheart. It's time. Time for what? I had been wondering all week. An apology? An acknowledgement? Maybe they'd finally admit that the $180,000 I'd loaned them over 6 years had actually built my business back up after they'd siphoned my early profits for Derek's debts. The highway stretched ahead, and my mind drifted through the ledger of our relationship. The $15,000 for Derek's gambling debts that became $30,000, the temporary office space they'd rented with my credit card that somehow never got paid back, the investors they'd scared away with their family business claims until I learned to keep them away from my professional life entirely. But today would be different. Mom said, wonderful news. Dad had actually called me himself, twice, to make sure I was coming. You'll want to be there for this, Ashley. Trust me. Trust. What a strange word coming from him. I checked my phone at a red light. A message from my business partner, Simone. You sure about this? Your parents have a pattern. I typed back, they said it's good news. Maybe people can change. Even as I hit send, some part of me, the part that kept spreadsheets on every dollar they'd taken, the part that had learned to document everything, whispered that I was wrong. The champagne bottle rolled again as I turned onto their street. I should have listened to that whisper. The driveway was packed. 7 cars I didn't recognize. Uncle Richard's SUV, Aunt Melanie's sedan, cousins I hadn't seen since Derek's last failed business venture. My stomach tightened, but I grabbed the champagne anyway. Maybe it really was a celebration. The front door was unlocked. I walked into a wall of silence. 30 faces turned toward me like I'd interrupted something sacred. The living room had been rearranged, chairs and rows facing the fireplace where my parents stood like they were about to give a presentation. 2 men in suits flanked them. Lawyers, my brain registered immediately. Not family friends. Lawyers. Ashley, you're here. Mom's voice was too bright, too performative. She crossed the room with open arms, and I let her hug me while my eyes scanned for answers. Derek sat in the corner, arms crossed, refusing to meet my gaze. We're so glad you could make it, Dad said, his sales director's smile firmly in place. Please sit down. We have something important to discuss. The only empty chair was in the front row, center, like a defendant's box. I sat, champagne bottle still clutched in my hand like a shield. As you all know, Dad began, addressing the room, family is everything to the Wilmots, which is why this situation is so difficult. He paused for effect. I'd seen him use this technique with clients. Build tension, control the narrative. Mom stepped forward, and that's when I saw it. The manila envelope in her hands, official looking, too thick to be a greeting card. "Ashley, honey," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern, "we need to talk about your business, about where it really came from." She handed me the envelope. Our relatives leaned forward, hungry for drama. I opened it. The first word I saw was plaintiff. The second was their names. The champagne bottle slipped from my fingers and shattered on their marble floor. 6 years earlier, I'd been sitting in the same living room with a laptop and a dream. 22 years old, 3 months out of college, and I'd just landed my first real client, a boutique hotel chain that needed a complete brand overhaul. The contract was worth $45,000, more money than I'd ever seen. "That's wonderful, sweetie," Mom had said, barely looking up from her wine. "But you can't run a business from your apartment. What would clients think?" Dad had leaned forward, suddenly interested. "You need an LLC, professional address, proper accounting systems." He'd smiled that warm, fatherly smile I'd craved my entire childhood. "Let me help you set it up. I know people." I should have questioned why he suddenly cared, why the man who'd refused to co-sign my student loans was now offering business advice. But I was 22 and desperate for his approval. Within a week, Dad had established Wilmot Marketing Solutions. Not Ashley Wilmot Marketing, just Wilmot. "Family name has weight," he'd explained. He'd registered it at their address for tax purposes. Made himself a signatory on the business account because you're young, banks trust established names. Set up vendor accounts with his contractor friends who'd give us family rates. The hotel contract went perfectly. I worked 18-hour days, delivered everything early, exceeded every expectation. The $45,000 hit the business account on a Friday. By Monday, $30,000 was gone. "Derek needed help," Dad had said when I'd called, panicking. "Emergency situation. You understand family comes first, right? We'll pay it back." They never did. Instead, they'd done it again and again. Every time I landed a major client, mysterious expenses appeared. Office upgrades I never authorized. Consulting fees for advice I never received. Family investments in Derek's endless failed ventures. I'd rebuilt anyway, clawed my way to success despite them. Now, apparently, they wanted to claim they'd built it for me. I didn't go home that night. I went straight to Simone's apartment, lawsuit in hand, and we read it together over whiskey neither of us tasted. "They're claiming the business is a family trust asset," Simone said, her voice hollow. "That you've been operating it fraudulently. Ashley, they're saying you stole from them." The irony would have been funny if it wasn't destroying my life. Monday morning, I called Rebecca Chen. If my parents wanted a legal war, they'd picked the wrong daughter to ambush. Rebecca was a litigator who'd made her reputation dismantling fraudulent contract claims. She was expensive, ruthless, and exactly what I needed. "Give me 3 days," she'd said after reading the complaint. "Something about this feels off." 3 days later, I sat in her office while she laid out documents like she was dealing cards in a poker game she'd already won. "Your father forged these," Rebecca said, tapping a stack of papers. "The operating agreement claiming the business is family property, notarized 6 years ago, supposedly signed by you. But look at the signature." I looked. It was close to mine, but the capital A was wrong, too curved. Dad had practiced my signature, but not perfectly. "There's more," Rebecca continued. "The business registration documents, the bank account authorizations, all of them have inconsistencies. Dates that don't match, notary stamps from a woman who retired 8 years ago, transaction records that contradict the timeline they're claiming." She pulled up a bank statement. "See this? They're saying you diverted company profits to personal accounts. But these withdrawals, every single one was made by your father using his signatory access. The IP addresses traced to their home computer." I stared at the evidence. 6 years of systematic fraud, documented and waiting. They didn't just steal from you, Ashley, Rebecca said quietly. They created a paper trail to frame you for the theft they committed. This isn't a lawsuit, it's a cover-up. Rebecca's investigator found Derek's name buried in the third page of discovery documents, not as a victim, as a beneficiary. Your parents aren't just trying to take your company, Rebecca said, sliding another folder across her desk. They're trying to transfer 30% equity to your brother as part of a settlement for his alleged contributions to the business. His contributions? I laughed, but it came out broken. Derek has never worked a day at my company. He doesn't even know what I do. According to this, Rebecca tapped the document, he provided, quote, strategic advisory services and family capital investments during the startup phase. They're valuing his contributions at $280,000. The exact amount of his gambling debts. I'd seen the collection notices that used to arrive at their house, back when I still visited regularly. Rebecca pulled up her laptop. My investigator accessed Derek's email. I'm not supposed to show you this, but... She turned the screen toward me. The email thread was from 4 months ago. Subject line, the Ashley problem. Dad, we need to move quickly. She's been asking questions about the early withdrawals. Derek, how much can we get? Mom, Gerald says if we claim family trust status, we can force a buyout, at minimum 40% equity. Derek, that covers the casino markers and then some. When do we serve her? Her birthday weekend, maximum humiliation. She'll be too emotional to think clearly. My birthday? They'd planned this for my birthday? I kept reading, my hands shaking. Derek, what if she fights back? Dad, she won't. Ashley never fights back. She'll pay us to make it go away, just like always. Derek, and if she doesn't? Mom, then we destroy her reputation and take everything anyway. We have the documents. We control the narrative. She's always been too soft to play hardball. I closed the laptop before I could see more. Derek knew. The whole time. Every family dinner, every fake text asking how I was. He knew they were setting me up. Rebecca's expression was grim. He wasn't just complicit, Ashley. He was counting on it. Aunt Melanie called on a Tuesday, her voice careful and quiet like she was afraid of being overheard. Ashley, I need to see you. Alone. Don't tell your parents. We met at a coffee shop 30 miles from their neighborhood, far enough that no one from their social circle would accidentally spot us. She arrived with a worn leather portfolio that looked like it had been hidden in an attic for years. I should have given you this a long time ago, she said, sliding it across the table. But I told myself it wasn't my business, that families work things out. Her hands were shaking. After what they did to you at that house, I can't stay silent anymore. Inside the portfolio was a ledger, handwritten, meticulous, spanning 8 years. My grandmother's handwriting. Your grandmother kept records of everything, Aunt Melanie explained. Every dollar she gave your parents, every loan to Derek. She knew something was wrong, especially after you started your business. She made me promise to keep this safe. I flipped through pages of entries, each one dated, categorized, annotated with my grandmother's sharp commentary. June 2019, Thomas borrowed $12,000 for Derek's rehab. Derek never went to rehab. Saw him at the casino 3 weeks later. September 2019, Antonia claimed they needed $8,000 for house repairs. Drove by yesterday, no repairs made. New furniture in Derek's apartment instead. March 2020, Thomas asked for $25,000 emergency medical expenses. Their insurance is platinum level. Called the hospital. No recent admissions. Suspect this is for Derek's gambling debts again. But it was the final entries that made my breath catch. January 2022. Ashley's business is thriving. Thomas mentioned helping her with administrative costs. I asked Ashley. She never authorized any help. They're stealing from her account. February 2022. Confirmed. Thomas has signatory access to Ashley's business, withdrawing funds regularly. Ashley doesn't know, must protect her, must document everything. The last entry was dated 1 week before my grandmother died. March 2022. Thomas talking about claiming ownership of Ashley's company, said she owes the family for their support, making plans with lawyer. I'm running out of time. Melanie, if you're reading this, give Ashley everything. She deserves to know the truth. Aunt Melanie wiped her eyes. She died before she could warn you herself, but she made sure you'd have proof. I held the ledger like it was made of gold. 8 years of evidence. 8 years of my grandmother watching, documenting, protecting me from beyond the grave. They've been planning this for years, I whispered. Yes, Aunt Melanie said, and now you can prove it. The mediation room was designed for civilized resolution. Neutral beige walls, a polished conference table, a retired judge named Harrison who specialized in keeping families out of court. My parents had chosen him carefully, someone who valued discretion, who'd encourage me to settle quietly and preserve the Wilmot reputation. They sat across from me looking like victims. Mom's eyes were red-rimmed, probably from calculated tears in the lobby. Dad wore his most trustworthy suit, the one he closed deals in. Derek wasn't there, too cowardly to face me directly. Their lawyer, Gerald Hastings, opened with the expected speech. We're here to find an amicable solution that honors family bonds while respecting business realities. I let him talk. Rebecca had coached me. Let them think they're winning right up until the moment they lose. Ms. Wilmot, Judge Harrison said gently, your parents are willing to be reasonable. A 40% equity stake, forgiveness of past family loans, and we can all move forward. 40%, I repeated, of the company I built? That we helped you build, Dad corrected, his voice firm. Ashley, we gave you seed money, connections, guidance. You gave me nothing but theft and forgery, I interrupted. The room went still. Rebecca opened her briefcase like she was performing surgery. Documents emerged in organized stacks. Bank records, forged signatures, grandmother's ledger, Derek's emails. 8 years of evidence, arranged like a closing argument. Ms. Wilmot has discovered some irregularities, Rebecca began, her voice clinical and devastating. She walked Judge Harrison through each document, every forged signature, every fraudulent withdrawal, every lie they'd built their case on. Mom's face drained of color. Dad's jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grinding. This isn't just a frivolous lawsuit, Rebecca concluded. This is organized fraud, forgery, and embezzlement spanning 6 years. Judge Harrison looked at my parents like they'd personally offended him. Is this true? Dad started to speak, but I stood up. 6 years of silence ended in 5 words. I'm not paying you, I'm prosecuting you. The story spread through their social circle like wildfire through dry grass. Within 48 hours, everyone who'd witnessed my humiliation in that living room knew the truth. Aunt Melanie made sure of it. Mom's book club disinvited her. Uncomfortable situation, they called it. Dad got quietly removed from the country club's board of directors. Derek's friends suddenly stopped returning his calls once they realized the family money well had run dry. I watched it unfold from a distance through Aunt Melanie's careful updates and the occasional forwarded screenshot. Mom posted on Facebook, "Sometimes families face challenges. We ask for privacy during this difficult time." The comments were brutal. Stealing from your own daughter isn't a challenge, Antonia. It's criminal. I always wondered how Derek afforded that lifestyle. Remember when they bragged about investing in Ashley's business? Now we know what that really meant. The criminal investigation moved faster than Rebecca expected. The DA's office was very interested in the forged documents, especially when they discovered Dad had used the same notary stamp on 3 other fraudulent contracts over the years. I wasn't his first victim, just his most profitable one. Uncle Richard called to apologize. I should have asked questions. That day in your living room, I knew something felt wrong. I just didn't want to believe. None of you wanted to believe, I said, not unkindly. They were very good at pretending. The house went up for sale within a month, not by choice. Legal fees and restitution demands had drained whatever reserves they had left. The for sale sign looked small against the facade they'd maintained for so long. Derek moved in with a friend, his 30% equity dream replaced with a potential conspiracy charge. Mom stopped posting on social media entirely. Dad's real estate license got suspended pending investigation. The Wilmot legacy, built on appearances and maintained through theft, collapsed in less than 60 days. Sometimes karma doesn't wait for the afterlife. The new office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, space for 12 employees, and absolutely no connection to the Wilmot family name. The sign on the door read, Chen and Wilmot Marketing. Simone and I, equal partners, no hidden signatories, no family complications. I was hanging photos when my phone buzzed, Mom's number. I'd blocked it twice. She'd found new ways to reach me. The voicemail was predictable. Ashley, please, we're your parents. Surely we can work something out. Family forgives. I deleted it without finishing. Rebecca called an hour later with news. Dad had taken a plea deal, 3 years probation, full restitution, permanent removal from my business. Mom avoided charges by cooperating. Derek was still negotiating, his lawyer scrambling to prove he was merely influenced by our parents rather than an active conspirator. How do you feel? Rebecca asked. I looked around my office. My name on the paperwork, my signature, the real one, on contracts. My decisions, my risks, my rewards. Free, I said, and meant it. Therapy helped me understand what Dr. Morrison called the fawn response, my lifelong pattern of appeasing them, of believing that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, they'd finally see my worth. But worth isn't something you earn from people incapable of giving it. Aunt Melanie visited on opening day, bringing champagne, a different bottle, a better vintage. Your grandmother would be so proud, she said. She already was, I replied, touching the framed photo on my desk. Grandmother and me at my college graduation, her hand on my shoulder, her smile, genuine. She'd seen my worth when I couldn't see it myself. The business grew, not because of family name or stolen capital, but because I was good at what I did. Clients came for the work, stayed for the integrity. Derek sent a letter 6 months later. No apology, just explanation. I threw it away unread. Some receipts aren't worth keeping. I built something real on the ashes of their fraud. Every contract signed, every client served, every employee hired, proof that my success was never theirs to claim. Mom called one last time, a year after the mediation. We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. No, I said calmly. You're people who share my DNA. Parents show up, parents protect, parents don't forge documents to steal their daughter's livelihood. I hung up before she could respond. That night, Simone and I celebrated our biggest contract yet, a national retail chain worth 7 figures, the kind of deal I used to dream about when I was 22 and desperate for my father's approval. You did this yourself, Simone reminded me, raising her glass. I know. And finally, completely, I believed it. The champagne tasted like victory.